Welcome to the Goya Gatherings podcast, a serene and inspiring space where the worlds of yoga and wellness converge. Every episode is a journey into the heart of yoga, offering you deep insights, uplifting stories, and practical wisdom. Our conversations are designed to inspire your journey and illuminate your path to well-being. Please remember that the views expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Goya Gatherings or its hosts.
Welcome to this initial episode. My name is Salla, and I'm here with Helene today, founder of Goya. So welcome to Goya. This is the episode which will offer information all about why this organization exists, the benefits, and the current landscape that we're in, which offers so much room for a service just like this one. And this hasn't come out of nowhere. This is a long-time observation of the yoga industry, innovation, listening and feedback. And so I'm so excited to be speaking with Helene to unravel all of that. So Helene, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here on the initial Goya podcast. And I can't wait to just jump right in and address all the things that I've been wanting to address for so many years. And finally, we're at the step where we've jumped into the pool and we're just ready to take the yoga education system and support for people in teaching and as well as students and wellness practitioners and wrap that all up in such a wonderful ball where everybody can connect. And, you know, we're in this global community where it's so important to support and encourage and be proactive in the community that we belong to.
Your passion is just radiant, and I'm so excited to absorb this with you, because if anybody doesn't know, I'm sitting here with Helene having the absolute pleasure to ask these questions for the first time. So we'll jump straight in to give everybody a clear understanding of Goya. So I'm wondering, can you provide an overview of Goya, which stands for Global Online Yoga Association? So that's the acronym. And its mission in the world of yoga. So an overview and your mission.
Right. And I think a great way to start is I would just like to first read a little preamble about how we came about, because it took a long time to put it all into a succinct little communication box so that people really understood why we exist. So I'm just going to read this a little bit first, and then I'll expand a little bit about it. And what we say is that we are forged from experience and we're here to craft better pathways. So Goya emerged from a palpable void that we, as yoga educators, myself included, recognized in the contemporary landscape, in a landscape that we felt was truly dominated by a monopoly. We saw that there was a pressing need for a fresh, dynamic entity. And this wasn't just about introducing another name into the mix. It was really about creating an organization deeply rooted in genuine inclusivity and adaptability. So traditionally and historically, others have maintained a one-size-fits-all approach. And for us, we really envisioned a space that celebrated diverse voices, diverse methodologies, and diverse traditions. So that's sort of the foundation, the building block where we began. And if I could just expand on that a little bit, because I'm really passionate about it.
Right.
We did find that the traditional paradigms that existed for yoga education associations and standards, they really were rigid and they didn't evolve. They didn't move with the times and the diverse needs of practitioners around the globe. We found that so apparent during the pandemic, and it underscored this urgency. You know, it left many of us as teachers, schools, grappling to just adjust in those unprecedented times. We didn't have the guidance and support we really needed. Many of us felt that we were navigating this pandemic storm without a compass. And in some instances, we felt constrained rather than empowered because the decisions that were so important to us, for example, could online teaching be acceptable? The decisions to allow for that were just being left aside, and it was a waiting game for many of us. And for many of us, it was our livelihood. And this highlighted the crucial need for an organization such as Goya that truly stands alongside its members, not dictating to its members, offering flexibility, offering direction. So we're not just about setting new standards or revamping credentials. We're really about reimagining the fabric of what yoga education is, how it's disseminated, how it's delivered, who can teach it. We believe in a truly fluid, dynamic approach that respects traditions of yoga while also being receptive to contemporary insights, different methodologies. Our goal is to foster a space where each voice not only resonates, but holds worth. So every single person who comes to Goya and wishes to participate as an active member has the power to change. And we can only change together. And we can only change with new ideas. We can only change the status quo if we work together as a community.
Right.
So in essence, we're not just a response to what was lacking, but we are a proactive step towards shaping an inclusive and adaptable future for yoga educators, yoga practitioners, wellness practitioners all around the globe.
Mm-hmm. What an amazing idea, but also something that really had to propel so fast forward due to the pandemic. So incredible response and realizing that void of support. So you've touched upon really what inspired the creation of Goya. Is there anything else you want to add there?
Yes, for me, I think it's really important for people to understand, first of all, standards, regulation, and credentialing in the yoga industry. Because I think there has been a myth and a misconception and one narrative for so long that in a world of misinformation, it also tends to get tangled into a web where people don't really know what the answer is. So I just want to make this very clear for everyone who is out there listening that it's very important that you understand yoga regulation, yoga standards, and yoga credentialing. And the answer to who regulates yoga, the very simple answer is absolutely no one. No one body, no one
do you think
organization.
People know that?
I don't think they know that.
Right.
And it's crucial for everyone to understand that there's no single governing body for yoga standards and credentialing. But as we know, many of us, myself included, have participated in contributing to one single narrative. Many of us are familiar with Yoga Alliance, which has been an organization that has definitely served a purpose in the yoga industry. But I think many yoga educators often assumed that there was no other option and they had to be part of this organization. And the reality is that it is a voluntary member organization. There is absolutely no requirement not to be a member of Goya, not to be a member of Yoga Alliance, not to be a member of Yoga Alliance Professionals UK, or any single other body that claims that they are a regulatory body. Please understand this. Historically, the yoga community has gravitated towards the most visible entity, which is Yoga Alliance, but often completely unaware that these affiliations were optional rather than required. And what we've done over the years, we have inadvertently sustained this single narrative. And I think it's time for change, and it's gone on for too long. And so again, while they absolutely did serve a purpose at a particular point in time, I think today we are ready to turn that page, and together our voices and our actions can craft an absolutely fresh and new narrative in the yoga governance world.
Wow. And it's such a time for revolution in tech and communities and connection across the board in the many different ways it comes. So would you say that how does Goya aim to revolutionize the way people approach and experience online yoga education specifically? Because now we're very much there as an option of training rather than in person.
Absolutely. Yes. And historically, I think in-person yoga training, as wonderful as it is not economically viable for 90% of people on the globe. And that is exclusionary. To me, that says person A, because you're in a certain position, you're welcome and you can join, but person B, who may be struggling and not in the same socioeconomic category, you're not really welcome because you can't afford those $4,000 or those £3,000 to attend. And while I appreciate that's the cost and that is the reality, it doesn't allow for accessibility and inclusivity. So allowing for the online option, which we have been asking for since 2010. So 12, 13 years.
Wow.
And every time I pushed a little bit harder for it, and when I say asking for it, really bringing it forth to groups like Yoga Alliance saying, why will you not allow for online programming? And the idea was that online programming is not quality programming. And we know that is completely untrue. And in fact, for many folks, the online programming can be a better learning tool because it's set to a learning pace for them. And what we found was that the moment the pandemic hit, literally within, I believe it was less than 5 days, those organizations who for years blocked online programming immediately turned around and allowed for online programming. So what changed in that 5 or 7 days or however long exactly it was nothing more than a consideration for, how can I say this diplomatically? Consideration for revenue stream. And that is a fact. Imagine if you run a member organization and you don't allow for a certain type of programming or offering, and all of a sudden that's the only kind of offering your members can give because now the entire world is closed down, you would lose every single one of those members.
Right.
So imagine you're an organization that's 100,000 plus members, and you have been saying no to them all along, and the pandemic hits, and all of a sudden you need to give this allowance because you serve no purpose. And so that allowance was given to us. But as a teacher and as a yoga educator, there was absolutely, in my personal opinion, and others can share their own opinion, there was absolutely zero guidance. You filled in a small questionnaire, you agreed to adhere to terms and conditions, and you were instantly approved for online programming.
Gosh,
and
so quite loose then.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're pushing, and all of a sudden a major world catastrophe forces the industry to turn on its heels overnight, and for them to say, oh, yes, so I guess it is quality programming today, right?
Gotcha.
So that was, as great as that was, because people needed to shift online, it was so frustrating to see that it took that. And when I say that, I mean the understanding that, you are going to lose every single member you have if you actually don't agree with them. Because all of these organizations are member-based. And as members, we should have a voting right to say, hey, we want online programming. It shouldn't be two people at the helm deciding for an entire yoga industry or a
Right.
small committee, right? Why is there no input? And to be fair, there have been questionnaires over the past couple of years, because what happened with that initial online approval was it was considered quote unquote temporary. And it wasn't until I believe it was September of 2023 when these organizations finally said, okay, we're going to allow for online programming permanently. Mm-hmm. So how could it have taken years to actually implement that permanently? And when I say permanently, nothing actually changed. Yoga schools around the world who already had their temporary access were automatically transitioned to permanent online providers. There was no particular check so it also created a whole nother dynamic, which was for a bunch of yoga schools to sort of pop out of nowhere. Right? Because now, which is not to say is a bad thing, because many of them are wonderful programs and wonderful schools, but it also allowed the opportunity for, people who were sort of just wishing to tap into that market really quickly and get out.
Sure.
And that's unfortunate, but we live in a society with human nature, and sometimes that is the case. But I struggled with that so deeply because on many forums, Facebook pages, etc., social media, I had asked the question a number of times during that time when the temporary allowance happened and the permanent, when are you going to make the decision? And it was always pushed out. We're working on it. We're working on it. Well, leaving an entire industry stranded from March 2020 to September 2023, unsure of what their livelihood would be, is I feel that's completely unethical, to be honest with you, and that's my personal opinion. But as a person who has, again, actively been a member of these organizations since 2009, my fees, my contribution, all of these things should go to something where I can actually be an active participant and actually receive value for what I'm providing to the organization, not just being held in turmoil. And again, many schools, many educators, many practitioners had no idea how to transition. There was no true offering of what that looks like,
Right. So if they weren't ready to transition, they were on their own. This organization didn't have any steps for them.
Yeah, I believe there was a few newsletters issued. But I mean, really what as a member, for example, say you have an individual who's not supremely tech savvy.
Yeah, right.
What does that even look like for them? They have no concept where to even begin. How do they get their programming online? Many had to, basically teach themselves through YouTube tutorials and all sorts of things, which is great. Learning is always great, but wouldn't it have been wonderful if there was a step-by-step direction of how you can now transition your classes for your community, your yoga teacher training program, what that looks like? And yet there was very little, if any, direction offered there. And the challenge is one might ask, Helene, then why did you stay with this organization or any of the organizations that you belong to? And to be honest, it was basically out of fear. And that's a terrible place to be coming from, because we were fearful that if we didn't stay with the organization, that students wouldn't come to us, because students already had the misperception that we as schools and yoga educators had to be part of the organization. And that is completely untrue, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's probably the second perspective on that point that might have gone amiss over the years. I know it did for me. So it's so interesting to hear about this revolution that was happening in the background for you much, much earlier, 2010, you said.
Yeah.
So you've sort of, like starting to think about that to bring an inclusive option to people.
Yeah.
And you
sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So I was just going to set the scene a bit here, because I had no idea about that timeline, 2010 to pandemic. You know, you being ready just because of what you were observing beforehand anyway, and about your own values, about what you feel is ethical to bring into the world of education and offering more accessibility. And you've shared the landscape of what happened during the pandemic, which I think sets the footing for people to understand now then. So in the realm of online yoga, what are the unique features or offerings that Goya brings to the table for both practitioners and teachers? Because that's, for me, again, maybe I didn't know. But the first body I was part of, regulatory body, I assumed it was really just for the teaching community. So I was really excited to read that Goya does offer something for both practitioners, as in well-being practitioners, so massage therapists and other types of well-being practitioners, as well as teachers.
Right.
So the question was really, what's unique about Goya for these people?
Yeah, well, and that's a big question, because
it's a big question. Huh?
Yeah, we have definitely spent many, not months, but years really thinking about what would we as members want from an organization, because we are the people, we meaning yoga educators, yoga students, yoga practitioners, wellness practitioners, which includes a vast array of people, from Reiki teachers to Ayurveda teachers to massage therapists and so many more. What would we want to see an organization that is not bound by regulation? Because again, we know that does not exist. But what would the value of being part of such an organization be for us? And for us, we decided it's really important to offer continuing education ongoing that is adaptable to the times. So for example, every single member gets access to what we call the Goya Academy. And that academy includes workshops, yoga classes, very specific workshops on things like how to move your practice or your studio or your teacher training or your physical business that you want to offer services online to the online world, because everything is making its way there. And we know it's a great way to reach so many more people. So having this academy where every single month we release new content for our members is really vital. And that's super important for us. We want to make sure that we have other things. So for example, each month we have a Dharma talk that happens, because I truly believe that Dharma is incredibly important in the world landscape as it exists right now. And so we have that.
Can I ask for a translation of, in case anybody's just qualified recently and this is a new concept for them, what would you translate Dharma talk to be in plain English for anyone that needs it?
So for us, Dharma talks are really discussions that a teacher is having with our community, where it's lecture based. So it's the person facilitating the Dharma talk is sharing some insight into a specific area. So for example, we have a Dharma talk on what does it mean to care? And when we say care, we mean care about your fellow human beings, care for yourself, compassion, empathy. So it's really about looking inward and understanding a little bit more about how we are all conscious beings and we are all one, without making it sound too, I know for some people that might be airy-fairy, but really it's discussions about what we want intrinsically to see in one another, how we want to share, how we can make that grow, how we can basically create one consciousness. I don't know if that is clear. But
yeah, it's relatable.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's relatable. It's sort of some of the foundations of many different types of training someone would do in the well-being sector. So yeah, I get it.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to share.
Before we go on, there are so many more benefits. Let's share so many more things that it's important that we wanted to make sure members have. Twice a year, we offer online yoga conferences to all of our members, which is an 8-hour event that happens in the spring and in the fall. And we bring in a number of speakers, and they're not just yoga related. For example, we bring in speakers who have online streaming platforms who can help you get to that next level. So it's very diverse. We bring in people from global communities that offer charitable programs around the world that our members could participate in. For example, one of the most common one is Habitat for Humanity that people would know of, where you go and help and assist. I took part in a wonderful one last year in India for global dental relief. And in our first online conference, you're going to meet this amazing woman, Sonam Sherpa, who used to live at the base of Mount Everest in a tiny, tiny village with the absolute minimal means to survive. And now she is running this amazing organization, which is part of our Goya giving tree. So each year we also pick one organization only that we have direct contact with, that we are intrinsically invested in and involved in, so that any of your donations automatically go to that organization. And it's a wonderful organization. It's all transparent. We want to make sure that what we provide to that giving fund is really actually going to the program and making a difference. We also have things like financial aid for schools, for teachers, for pretty much anything. We know that people struggled during the pandemic, and while other organizations have an avenue for financial aid, it's incredibly difficult to access that. There's not a whole lot of questions that need to happen. When people are struggling, people are struggling. For example, I'm not sure, for those of you who know me, you know that during the pandemic, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So on top of all of this, I was going through breast cancer, and I was fortunate. I have a wonderful support system. I was stable financially, but I thought, what about the woman sitting next to me in the same chemotherapy room, who was a single mother, who couldn't feed her child, who couldn't go to work, who had no idea how to take her, and this particular individual happened to be a yoga teacher, had no idea what to do or how to get to teach, and how could she teach being so terribly ill, and just no access to funding, even if it's just a little bit to help you get to the next step. So I believe financial support is a real thing that people do need. The world is an expensive place to be. And if you have one hiccup like that, it can be devastating for an entire family unit. It can be devastating for an individual. We have mental health access. We have
that is great.
So it's really important that we don't just say, oh, well, you can get it, but you really can't get it, right? You know, we have things such as membership discounts, which are great. I mean, easy enough to access for everybody. But we also want it to not just be for a yoga mat or for this. We want it to be for therapy. We want it to be for insurance providers. We want it to be real products that people need on an everyday basis, whether it's a grocery delivery in your neighborhood, things like that. We've also partnered up with 3 of the world's largest insurance providers, because this goes back to the whole myth understanding that you needed to be a member of one of these professional organizations in order to get your insurance. And that is absolutely 140,000% untrue.
Yeah, again, I wonder how many people, because I thought that was real. So
right.
yeah,
and you told me about that earlier in the discussion.
Yeah.
And I was sadly disappointed to hear that you thought that.
And touching on what you said, touching on what you said earlier about there sometimes being a fear element when there's just one place that we think exists.
Right.
Can be the thing that stops any curiosity or asking of questions. So it's so interesting that you keep bringing up these things that people think are real, and just busting these myths left, right, and center. It's probably going to be very refreshing for people. Their world's opening up again now. Wow.
Yeah, and I absolutely hope that is the case, because I mean, I can only give an example that everybody would know about. So we all know about Amazon, right? And we've all had a delivery from Amazon. And we often go there because it's convenient. It's always the first thing that pops up on our Google search. It's very well funneled to our information sources, so that we think, okay, that must be it. And we don't have a lot of extra time on our hands to look here and look there. Sometimes we just do what everybody else is doing because we think that that's the case. And I, to be quite honest, was just tired of that. And I thought, if I'm tired of it, there's got to be other people who are tired of it or don't understand it. And so how can we make this relatable and understandable for people to know that Goya is an organization that still will offer you recognition for all of your schools, your programs that you've completed, in addition to many programs that other organizations have never even considered looking at. For example, yin yoga, restorative yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, not just simple 200-hour, 300-hour, 500-hour programs. And then really making it accessible in that the program you came from doesn't have to have exactly 1 hour in this particular curriculum, 2 hours in this. A lot of the program is dependent on the school you went to. For example, if you have a Kundalini practitioner teaching a yoga teacher training, that's going to be very different than somebody who is a vinyasa-based teacher. And why can we not celebrate those differences rather than trying to box everybody into the same corner? Because if yoga is about anything, it's about acceptance, understanding, compassion, diversity. Is that not what we should be all about to begin with, right?
So interesting, and so refreshing to hear about all of the benefits, including very relatable areas of life that make things easier to be able to have a career in well-being. So thank you for covering all of those.
Yeah. And I think one big thing for me was, again, I always think about accessibility, and again, in this case, financial accessibility. So the fees that you pay for your annual membership as an individual do not exceed $49 per year. And that's very important for people to understand, that even if you cannot afford it, you let us know. No one will be denied access to our organization. Because we know for some people, $49 might not be a lot. For another group, it might be the difference between whether they can feed their family or not.
Yes,
And we don't want anybody to have to explain that to us. We can never understand what another individual is going through, but we can show compassion and we can show empathy. And it's not about, making this a multi-million-dollar organization. That is not what this is about. What this is about is that, we have members have a set fee per year. Schools have a set fee per year, which is completely minimal compared to what exists out there. But that we actually take that funding and we put it back into the organization so that we're always creating content, we're creating events, we're creating all sorts of things so that our members can actually come and be a community, not just log in once a year, pay your dues, and wait till the next year. And that's not what we want to be. We want to be an organization that provides an actual meaningful service for our community.
That's beautiful. There's so much space for that right now. And it's in everybody's awareness as a place of interest as well. So I have a question about accessibility and inclusivity. And listening to some things you've already covered, you've covered a lot, but I have a feeling there's more. So I'm going to ask the question as if you haven't heard it yet, just to see, because you gave us a clue that you are so interested in accessibility, and you gave some beautiful examples of some ways that you have designed options for people here. So the question is, how does Goya prioritize accessibility and inclusivity in its online platform to cater to a diverse global audience? You covered finance, which is a huge one. I'm interested in time personally. How is this inclusive and accessible? Yeah. So I've had experiences in the past where there's a lot I have to do time-wise on this thing to be able to even access, like it takes quite a while to even have any sort of communication back. And then there's this in-between space where, well, what am I waiting for? So that's such people are time short now. And I have access to Goya. So I'm asking this because I've spotted some really wonderful quick communications back, which I love. Just soothes me. I go, oh, okay, so now I just enjoy. But I'd like to know if you did that intentionally, because I know you've been in the sector for such a long time. If it's something you just do automatically at this point.
We do. And this is, if I dare say, it's my pet peeve, where when I email any organization and they respond with the classic, due to the pandemic, or we'll get back to you within 18 business days, or something ridiculous like that. Absolutely not. We are community driven. We are here to support our communities. So our commitment is no longer than one business day will your questions be answered by us, and often much sooner. Everything is in-house here. So there are live team members here supporting you. And this comes out of a very huge frustration for me when I have dealt with different organizations in our sector. For example, I am still waiting for a response to an email from September from an organization that I pay thousands of dollars a year to be a member of. How is that possible to me? I don't understand how that is possible. And I know the email was received because I received the autoresponder. I also know because I have followed up with 6 emails since then asking the same question and whether my initial question would be answered. And still to this day, we are currently entering the month of February 2024 and absolutely no response. How can an organization not be... personally, I would be embarrassed if that was my organization. I and I'm a member. Imagine, if there's someone general in the community and they never hear back from somebody. I want, as a member, I want to know that, my question has some value. I needed to know this answer many, many months ago. And since then, I've had to sort of navigate because I'm still waiting for the final answer. And, yes, things can happen. There can be technical issues, but can that happen 6 emails in a row? Probably not. So
Right.
I'm pretty certain that the organization that I was dealing with has things in place to be able to mitigate that. But the question is there anybody on the other end? Is there really a person there actually checking these things? And again, that for me, that human connection is critical, and answering people's questions and giving them a real answer, not just saying, I'm not sure, or maybe you can, search this or search that. I mean, we might not know the answer to the question, but we're going to do our best to find out for you. And we're going to let you know that. And again, that reply to people's communication is critical for us. And I don't ever want to have an instance where we have not responded to a person. I think that is a terrible way to run an organization. And I think it is the foundation of an organization to be able to support your members in that moment when they really need it. And it could be such a basic question, logging in, or, where do I find out more about restorative yoga? Or, just simple things. But that question is important to that individual. And there's a reason why they've reached out. And we're here to be available to our members, because our members are our entire organization. We work for our members, not the other way around.
I love that, because it's all about keeping things moving, isn't it? Especially when the well-being sector is rooted in business practice.
Right.
So I love that energy keeps going to support members. Thank you for that was personally indulgent for me, because I was so pleasantly surprised. And I thought, yeah, the designer of this is really refreshing. I love that there is a dedicated team. That's so nice. Is there anything else you want to say about catering to a diverse global audience for accessibility and inclusivity?
Is there anything else I want to say about that? Well, it's always changing. I know that for a fact. And I also know that we might not know all the right questions and might not have all the right answers at this stage. So this is where bringing together a community of ideas and opinions and sharing is so important, because we want to make sure that we are covering as much diversity, as much adaptability as we possibly can. And again, I firmly believe that you surround yourself with the smartest people in the room, and people working in this industry are the people who know what the industry needs. And so people who are working with individuals with physical challenges, people who are working with people who have things like dementia, trying to also bring yoga into the healthcare systems. That's really relevant and important. So we want to have our members help us build out what that really looks like. And that's going to be an ongoing project, because things will change all the time. But we know that we're struggling with mental health. We know that we're struggling with, kids being on social media for excessive amounts of time. What does that look like? How can yoga assist with transitioning, how that works for them in life? How do we deal with people who have mobility issues? So it's not just about, catering to that yoga studio where everybody comes and everything's great and wonderful, but really looking at the outskirts of everything and seeing how we can have adaptability, inclusivity, accessibility. And what does that really mean? Because those words can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I, as an individual, might and very well do not have all the insight into everything, but I'm hoping that our membership brings that insight to the organization and says, hey, we really need something for ABC. We really need to encourage yoga in these communities. We really need to find some link between our wellness practitioners and our practice and how we can work together to offer something more holistic to everyone. So it's all I see in front of me when I think of this is I just see so many little bubbles that pop up everywhere. It's sort of like when kids are blowing, the little bubbles, the soap bubbles, they're just everywhere. And inside of all of those bubbles are so much information and relevance. And those bubbles are the members that can also feed information to us so that we as an organization collectively can make the changes that this industry so drastically needs.
Right. And I can agree with that. I loved that you really offered some highlights of Goya there. And we've spoken about the member benefits earlier, but I feel like that's just more on that is the opportunity to come forward and shape this landscape and to bring it into a place where it's really making a difference is really what it comes down to, what I'm hearing. So it's just so refreshing. And you've spoken about fostering a sense of community and connection through the memberships in this way, inviting in information. Yeah. Considering the virtual nature of the platform, how is it that people, just so they can get a taste, how is it that people can deliver that information to you? Will it be something that you publish and then people can also come forward as and when? The opportunity?
Yeah, so we're still working on all the little parts of that, but absolutely, people can contact us directly via email. That's not a problem. We also have an internal platform where people can provide information there. So there's all sorts of community aspects on the back end of the platform for our members where they can share things about themselves, where they can share things with us. They can discuss in private community forums with their peers, what they would like to see. And of course, we see all that information as well. So we'll know what's quote unquote trending. So if we have, 5,000 yoga teachers who say, we really don't understand how to move our practice to the online forum, or we're looking for a streaming service, we know that as the organization, our members need some guidance on this. Let's take the next step and help them get there. So we're always monitoring the information because information is critical. If you don't have information, you really don't know what's missing and you don't know what decisions you need to make long term. So we have an excellent forum. You can be as active or as inactive as you want, but I would highly suggest that people participate. And we have found that since we launched that our members are in there regularly, as opposed to, signing up and never going in there again. Because they also, for example, when they go to the Goya Academy, they can earn their CE credits automatically through our academy. There is no extra fee for such things. Another great thing is that our schools and our members can actually, I won't say the word advertise because I don't know, for some reason I don't like that word, but they can promote their programs and their studios and to our entire internal community. So whereas historically that has never been allowed with any organization, you have never been allowed to say, oh, we're offering these 200-hour classes in the next year. Part of this platform is that you can absolutely provide listings to your events, all those sorts of things. So imagine you have this entire global community who can now share all of the things that they're doing. It will only allow for growth and change for everyone who's involved. So for all active participants, it will make such a huge difference. And everyone will benefit from it.
It really sounds that way, just continuously building on the connection.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'd like to add in there that it's so interesting to me, this platform, because many wellness practitioners may have a couple or more different qualifications in different styles of well-being practice. So personally, I started off with the yoga teacher trainings, and then I went into massage therapy, and now I'm about to take a deep dive into end-of-life care doula style training. So it's so nice that there's one space, because they all overcross and interlink in so many ways. So I just think it's really lovely to have one space which welcomes all of it, because there's so many learnings between each practice which link and are relevant.
Right.
And sharing that can be lovely.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, because we know from information and data that many yoga practitioners are also other types of holistic practitioners, just like yourself.
Yeah.
So, and there's also wellness practitioners who are not yoga practitioners, but who realize the value of yoga and the holistic approach for their practice. And again, unfortunately, especially in North America, including yoga in mainstream healthcare has not come to fruition yet. But wouldn't it be amazing if we could get wellness practitioners to just take a little bit of a glimpse of yoga back to their practice? And, if they choose not to, that's great too. But the fact that they're joining us tells us that there is an initiative in that community to really start the push for that. And they are a completely regulated industry often. Massage therapists, chiropractors, psychologists, psychiatrists. So they can make change. They can take the change that they're sensing and take it back to their regulatory organizations and say, this is happening. We want change, right? Because they have a voice there as well. So again, it's all one. We are all connected, whether we want to believe that or not. So, and imagine it's a domino effect. You start with a little tiny thing and you think, okay, is this going to make any difference? And then all of a sudden the changes are happening. And, I will say I'm a little bit sad that I didn't, launch Goya a little bit earlier, but I also realized that probably the timing was not ideal because so many things were going on in the world. But I had been putting this on the back burner for so long, mainly out of fear. And then all of a sudden I had a terrible instance that really pushed me over the edge, which was where one particular organization, after I chatted with them as a yoga school at that time, had asked me to increase my price point because they felt that giving it at a lesser price point, it has an illusion that there's no value to it. And I just thought, you are actually asking me to increase my price for something that I do not have to increase my price for. And I just thought, this is completely backwards. Like, this thinking is so absurd. And so, so from that little domino, that, thank God he asked me that question, thank goodness, or mentioned that in our meeting, because that was the catapult for me to say, absolutely no more. And little by little, change will come through all kinds of things. So there's so much to change. There's so much good we can do together. And I think if people really understand how this industry works, the yoga industry, especially as far as standards and credentialing and all that sort of thing, that you realize, again, absolutely no one regulates yoga. And where you choose to consciously spend your membership dues is really your choice.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so interesting. It's so interesting to build this picture of why this is all happening, where it's come from, the experiences you've had, busting these myths left, right, and center. And then at the end of the day, really addressing such a rapidly evolving landscape in digital wellness. So I have a question around that, which is, what role does Goya envision for itself in shaping the future of online yoga education?
Yeah, so again, this comes back to involving our membership to really see how things are going to change. We know, especially if we just separate the yoga side from it, the technological side, it changes so rapidly. But I think the way we reach the most amount of people is through technology. But yet there are still very remote areas in the world that don't have accessibility to technology. So we also have to think about, how do we get access to those people, and how do they get access to other people? So their model has to look a little bit different. So I think over the next 5 to 10 years, what we see today may not even exist in the same format. We're coming up with things like AI and all kinds of other things. What that looks like, it's not like once upon a time where you could have a 10-year predictor on where things are. I think it's an evolving process, and I think it's really important to not sort of say, okay, this is exactly how it's going to look at this stage, because it could very well change very quickly depending on all types of circumstances. So I can't give you a set vision of what that looks like. But what I do know is that if we work together collectively, it can only be a wonderful and amazing thing for the world in general, not just for us as yoga practitioners, as schools, as holistic practitioners. Imagine if we can plant the seed of just consciousness in little pockets around the globe, we would be advancing, humanity, I think. And that might sound really grandiose, but really that's what we're doing. Isn't that why we're here?
Mm-hmm. So this is we've planted the seed, and now we are going to watch what happens around the seed to nurture it in the way it needs to go. And it's a bit of a watch this space, I guess, but it's so great to hear that your ear is to the ground and you're open to the information. I mean, so refreshing as an organization to have that attitude.
Yeah, and we will never, and I will say this, we will never act as if we know everything and anything, or we will know the right course of action, but we will do what is in the best interest of our community as a whole, because that's really relevant. So, for example, one of the things we offer is quote unquote voting rights, which means if we have a drastic change to certain policies, we will put it to our membership and we will take a vote and take some insight and make our decisions that way. I won't be sitting in my little tiny home office and making a decision for 100,000 people, because that serves no purpose, because I have no idea what Sarah in the UK is thinking, or Johan in Switzerland is thinking, or one of our members in Thailand is thinking. Everyone is in a different situation, and everyone deserves to have input into how this industry evolves, and how this community really participates in the change of the industry. And shouldn't we as people in the industry be able to advocate and make a change? And up until now, that has not happened. We have been asked to conform to certain things that I have no idea who made these things. I was never asked for input. And I think we're past that. I think as humans, we are a little bit more evolved, that we really need to understand that we need input from everywhere to make good decisions.
I agree with that, which takes us on to the last question I had for you here, which you've covered so nicely, which was all about how Goya addresses individuals' needs and goals. The need for choice being one of the things you've covered here, definitely. Having access to making a choice to be able to make a change, so important. But I'm also interested in how Goya addresses individuals' goals, because that has a different drive behind it sometimes.
Right. So could you give me an example of what you're thinking of?
So I'm thinking about seasoned practitioners, teachers, schools, and maybe even beginners to yoga. They're all going to have different goals, whether it be, through business or personal development. So there's an element of being able to really listen to what it is they need.
Right.
And how do you think you can address that with so many people also? That's a real question.
It is a real question. And it's a great question because, again, as our membership has just started blooming, we expect it to continue to grow at a very rapid pace. We have the infrastructure and the teams to address different aspects. So, for example, if we have feedback from our actual certified teachers, we would take that feedback and we would look at that and we would really address it with that particular community, because you can't apply everything to every single member. It doesn't work that way. For example, a student practitioner who's perhaps in a student yoga teacher training right now will have a different need, just like you said. So they need to understand what happens when you leave that training. What is absolutely step one that happens? And I have never seen that addressed anywhere. No one knows what that is other than become a member of this organization. or another organization or whatever, right? It's never like the practical things that individual needs. So we address that through our Goya Academy. We make sure that we tweak content that's really specific for people starting out or people who have been what one would call, say, a master teacher. Some people who never went to a formal yoga teacher training because they've been practicing yoga since 1960. When it came to the Western world here, and have so much insight and input to offer that asking them to now go through a 200-hour program makes absolutely no sense, right? They have value and they can bring their experiential experience to the platform, and they will also be recognized. But they have an entire different offering than what a teacher who, say, has been teaching for 5 years and completed a program last year. So really, we're going to have forums, which we already have in the back end, community forums for the different types of groups of individuals, really watching that communication and interaction to see what people are really needing, because we find that if one person says they need this, often other people will say, yeah, I didn't know that I was the only person who needed this. So again, it's quite vast when you put that question out there, but we are committed to, as we grow as a member organizations, we again are committed to taking our resources and putting that back into the organization. So as we grow, as those resources grow for us, and when I say resources, to be absolutely transparent, those financial resources, because we do need financial resources to be able to create offerings. But it's really important that we are utilizing those to put things back into the community, to having, websites that are accessible, because that is one of the most basic things. People who don't understand technology don't often know how to navigate through that. So making information transparent for everybody, making sure that when we get a contact that we have someone who is responding, and then taking that information and saying, hey, that is a really great question. Let's pose that question to our community. Let's ask them, because maybe another 80,000 people also have that same question. So again, it's going to be different avenues of how we access that information. But again, our commitment is to be completely transparent, that we're looking for as much information from our members as they're willing to offer us. But the more they're willing to share with us, the more we know what is their need and their desire for long-term change, right? And again, every single individual who's a member is unique. Even if we have 40,000 student members, each one of those 40,000 individuals is unique, and they have something different to offer. So we're dealing with a lot of human interaction. But again, I think we only grow and change and learn from each other. And that's really important. So to sum that up, again, send everything to us. If you've got an idea, if you think we are needing to change something, if you just share it with us so that we can hear. Even if you're not a member of ours, please let us know. It's really important for us to know what the community is thinking out there. And please, if you're out there and you're thinking of an organization, or you're thinking to change organizations, which you don't have to, but we would love for you to be part of us. We also have a grandfathering system for those of you who are already members of other professional organizations. You'll find all that information on our website. We're not going to ask you to jump through hoops that don't really exist, because we don't create hoops just for the sake of creating them. Please, we would love to have you here. And, I think you will be pleasantly surprised with what you see. And we invite you, one and all, to come and check us out at Goya.
What a beautiful way to create an invitation to close this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was such an interesting deep dive into so many things I had no idea about. Also, the global view you have, I think, is super refreshing. And the word adaptability that you brought in as well, that's really a place of interest for so many people right now. Right. So many things on offer. And is there anything you would like to leave the listeners with today?
If I could just share one bit of information for people thinking about this, or trying to perhaps make a decision or not make a decision, whether this is a community space for you. Just remember, if we change nothing, nothing changes. And that is the ultimate, that's the ultimate sad part of things, is that if we stay in a fear-based module, we will not be able to change anything, and we will not be able to make a difference. And I have a tag on our website that is, join the revolution for change. And this really is about change and making real change. So together we can do this. I can't do it myself. I can't do it with 3 other people. I need the community to be on board, and I need us to implement change that is so desperately needed within our industry. So please, we welcome you exactly and perfectly as you are.
Wow, couldn't that be a more inclusive last message for everybody listening? Thank you so much. What an adventure we've been on today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always great to just chat to people.
Helene, that was so refreshing on so many levels. Thank you so much for gifting us your time, but not just that, your experience and your observations, and some things that we may not even be thinking about, but above all, busting all of those myths that I myself didn't even know until you told me, and a few I've learned today on top of that. So there is so much to digest for people, but moreover, I think a really inspiring place to start considering what does it feel like to have more choice again in our lives, because that is what I've taken away from this personally. So
thank you so much, Salla. It was wonderful. I have goosebumps just that this is finally happening, and I am just ready for whatever's coming, and I'm excited for all of us. So thank you, and have a wonderful and amazing week, everyone.
thanks, Helene, and thanks, everyone. Have a great day.